welcome back to Aetheral Space 2.19.
Aetheral Space, welcome back. So last time, Helga and Dragon were confronting each other. Mila stopped them. Aiden, the coward, shot Helga and kind of...
Imagine shooting someone in the back. Dragon was never.
And Q, yada yada, he's trying to grab power. And right as things were going to shit and Dragon was freaking out, Skipper's like, what did I miss? I'm back. With the medicine, the Rasbalux.
We did it.
How's it going, kiddo? Said Skipper, looking down at Dragon. Dragon suppressed the urge to groan. He'd sat himself down on a hill just outside the encampment in an effort to finally get some peace and quiet, and somehow the most annoying man in the galaxy had found him anyway. Excuse me. He looked up at Skipper, hands still clasped in his lap. I've been better, he said, shrugging. You took down a special officer, Skipper grinned. That ain't nothing. Only after drugging him out of his mind, and I nearly died in the process. But you didn't, said Skipper, wagging a finger, and that's the most important thing. Dragon thought about it for a second, and shifted his position in the grass, wincing from the lingering pain in his body. You're right, I guess, he said grudgingly. Wouldn't it be begrudgingly? Skipper nodded.
No.
I always am. Don't get ahead of yourself, Dragon chuckled, rolling his eyes all the same. Then his face turned to downcast. You say I've won, but things don't seem to have gotten any better. I managed to save everyone, but at the end of it all, they're just miserable and angry. In what way did I win, exactly, apart from not dying? With a grunt, Skipper sat himself down next to Dragon, looking down at the almost completely packed-up humanist camp. After a moment, he spoke. I love that Skipper has an Uncle Iroh vibe now. like when you first meet him, you think he's the crazy scientist character, but he's kind of like the wise elder. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah? What are you saying?
Yeah, he's got some wisdoms.
You know, he said, as if carefully considering every word, there's never such a thing as a perfect victory. I've never seen it. Not even once. And I've seen a lot of things. Even if you win and put everything you've got into it, you're not going to get everything you want out of it. That just isn't possible. Dragon raised an eyebrow. What is this, the moral of the story? Just some friendly advice, kiddo, Skipper shrugged. Don't get disappointed when the world doesn't work the way you'd like it to. Down below, there was shouting from near the rocket, Aiden barking out orders with the authority he'd somehow snatched hold of. The disorganized humanists were in a state where they'd listen to whoever was loudest, clearly. It felt like the world had become a little darker, to be perfectly honest. He gave Skipper a look, and a thought occurred to him. Speaking from personal experience, he said, testing the waters. Kiddo, said Skipper, smiling sadly. I'm nothing but personal experience. Ruth was sitting on a fold-up chair outside the medical tent, fingers fidgeting in her laps. She's more than one. She looked up at
tyrants.
She looked up as Dragon and Skipper approached, a noticeable relief creeping into her smile. Hey, she said. Hey, said Dragon, holding up a hand to block the sun from his eyes. Been a while. She said, if you were generous with what you called speech. I love the way you write. Her eyes glanced towards the medical tent, anxiety clear in them. Skipper was keeping quiet for once in his life, so it was up to Dragon to inquire. How's it going there? I handed over the Rasblocks, she said, smiling thinly. Mila's been there in a while. I assume been in there a while? Been in there a while, though. You don't think... I'm sure they're fine, cut in Skipper, raising a placating hand. Ruth nodded. She seemed ready to trust Skipper no matter what he said. So, said Dragon, depositing himself in another nearby chair. His poor, weary bones needed rest after all his recent heroic efforts. You guys took your damn time, huh? Excuse me again. We got held up, said Skipper. Ran into some pirates and had a dogfight with a cyborg. Dragon rolled his eyes. Yeah, right. Then he noticed Ruth quietly nodding. Seriously? He said, unbelieving. That's true? That actually happened? Sure did, she muttered, the memories of it clearly unpleasant. It pains my heart, Mr. Hadrian, said Skipper, faking a sniffle as he thumped his chest with his fist, that you would think me a liar. I honestly am in shock. I might die. I wish. Ooh, cold. You see, Ruth, said Skipper, wiping a crocodile tear from his eye. You see the kind of treatment I have to deal with here? The sheer level of contempt. As Skipper's trashy theater continued on, Mila stepped out of the medical tent, stripping away the sterile mask that had been covering her face. Sorry, I'm starting to lose it here. She looked more tired than Dragon had ever seen her, huge dark bags under her slightly bloodshot eyes. Her mouth was a thin, dry line, and when she spoke it was with a flat, pained monotone. "They'll make it," she said quietly. "Should take a day or two for the symptoms to fully dissipate." "Hey," Ruth said, clearly trying to be as empathetic as she could. Dragon had told them all about how things had ended up with Helga. "Things'll get better." Mila barely looked at her. She grunted, brushing a loose lock of black hair out of her face. And with that, she staggered away, off to the waiting Humulist rocket. That was where Helga was being kept too, frozen, ready for judgment by the leaders of the Humulist commune. "What do you think will happen to her?" said Dragon quietly. Skipper looked at Mila's shrinking form. "She's getting on the rocket, I think." "Not her," Dragon snapped. "Helga. What'll happen when she reaches the Humulist fleet?" Skipper and Ruth glanced away, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "Well," said Skipper, "I'd hope for some justice, but I don't know about that. I've heard some nasty rumors about the Humulist Apex Bishop." "Things will work out," said Ruth, smiling a little more optimistically. "Mila will make them. I'm sure of it." Fair enough. What exactly could Mila do, though? Apart from her medical expertise in this camp, Dragon had never gotten the sense that she'd held an especially high position in the Humulist sect as a whole. To the people who'd be judging Helga, Mila might as well be some rando who'd wandered in off the streets. Someone to be either shut up or ignored. Mila disappeared into the rocket. "Hey," said Ruth, recapturing Dragon's attention.
Damn it, I thought I killed you!
Fucking a taller Dragon appears from behind him. "What's poppin', Ruth?" She grinned a false grin at him. "Like I said, things will work out for them. If you just don't give up, they always do." Dragon smiled. "You're right," he lied. In Bruno's memory, he was captured mid-scream, body frozen between 1 second and the next as it spasmed in the seat, kept in place by a thick bundle of Neverwire. He was in the interrogation room, that small dingy cube, the masked face of his interrogator half visible in the shadows. The man held a huge industrial hammer, the kind used by maintenance technicians to remove organic mass that clung to ships. From the position he was standing, the angle of his arms, Bruno guessed that he'd just had his hands smashed in this memory. That didn't much narrow down when this had happened. His hands had been smashed so many times over those 6 months that it all seemed to bleed together. He did his best to keep his breathing steady. He couldn't ask Serena to swap with him for a period, get him out of this memory. She was unconscious too. They were in this together for the moment. "How you holding up?" he said. Oh, that's Bruno, sorry. "How you holding up?" he said quietly, doing his best not to look at the interrogator. Don't like it here," came Serena's growl. Memories like this made her angrier than anyone. "Me neither," he mumbled. "Don't like it here," she said again. "When are we going to wake up?" Bruno sighed, looked up at the single light bulb that illuminated the interrogation room. For a time, he'd hallucinated that it was the sun. "Don't know," he said. "We've been out for a while." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. The words were there in his head, fully formed, but he found himself reluctant to let them escape out of his mouth. "Do you think we lost?" he finally said. It would only make sense. Hadrian was very unlikely to be able to handle a special officer. Just before he blacked out, Bruno had seen him doing something with the syringes, but he couldn't imagine Zakos getting knocked out before managing to crush both Hadrian and Bruno. "If we lost," said Serena quietly, "we'd be dead, right?" "Right. I don't feel dead." Bruno, am I doing the Serena voice better now?
Maybe not a little less monotone, though.
It's hard to do breathy and not monotone. You have a lot of requirements. Bruno furrowed his brow. "You've never been dead. You don't know what it would feel like." "Really? Then this is what being dead feels like? I feel like I'm sleeping." "Like that?"
Yeah.
He shrugged as much as his restraints would allow. "You never know." Again, silence settled over the interrogation room, undesirable as the aching pain in their hands slowly began to make itself unknown. Without distraction, the memory felt free to let itself unfold. "You're weird, Bruno." Excuse me. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, audience. Serena's voice cut through the pain, and the scene around them again slowed to a stop. Bruno sighed. As ever, Serena's train of thought was like a minecart speeding through a labyrinth. "How am I weird?" "You kind of want this to be what dying feels like, because that'd mean you were right about this being a bad plan." She laughed as if she'd told a funny joke. "You're so weird!" Shifting in the seat as much as he could, Bruno growled, "I'm not weird." "Yes, you are!" Serena could be so childish, even when there was a non-zero possibility that they were both a corpse. You're so suspicious. You don't even trust that you're alive. You're such a weirdo. I'm not, and besides... Light began to flood into the memory, the ceiling cracking open like an egg, letting in stray rays of the sun. Bruno squinted as he looked up at the golden glow. The hell is that supposed to be? He muttered. Huh, said Serena. I guess we might be dead after all. Bruno turned to look at Serena, but she was no longer there. And a second later, neither was he. Wake the fuck up! Oh, sorry. Wake the fuck up, said an irritating voice softly.
Harry, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
Sorry, that caught me off guard. Give me a minute. Sorry. Bruno groaned as he opened his eyes, did his best to ignore the aching pain flowing across his muscles. He was lying on a soft bed, medical tent most likely, hooked up to more than a few monitors. Definitely not dead, then. He looked up. Dragon Hadrian was sat by the side of the bed in a disposable chair, hands clasped on his lap. Guess I'm alive, then? Said Bruno weakly. He'd tried to raise a hand, but the useless thing was shaking too hard for it to be of any use, even more than usual. Seems that way, said Hadrian. A half-suppressed smirk played across his lips. Bruno groaned. Your plan worked, then? Aren't you glad? Hadrian said smugly. I told you it would. Yeah, Bruno said, settling his head back in his pillow. To his surprise, a chuckle escaped from his throat. Something funny? Hadrian said, raising an eyebrow. Now that Bruno looked, it was obvious that the guy had more than a few cuts and bruises himself. A cane leaned against the chair, obviously for his use. For a moment, Bruno thought about saying nothing, about keeping his mouth shut and surly. But even though every instinct told him not to, he found himself talking all the same. It feels good to be alive. Hadrian cocked his head. I would think so, yeah. Personally, I love being alive. Can't get enough of it. Shut up, Bruno murmured. Then, turning away so that his face couldn't be seen, he said, I guess you must have saved me then. Hadrian, out of Bruno's vision, didn't talk for a couple of seconds. An awkward silence settled over the tent, save for the whistling of the wind outside. You saved me first, Hadrian finally said. Even more surprising, it seemed genuine. Bruno took a deep breath, stuffed down whatever scraps of pride he had left, and spoke. I don't trust you, Hadrian. But I guess I don't distrust you either. I'll wait and see what kind of person you are. Another silence, but it seemed much less awkward this time. Hadrian ended it by laughing quietly. That doesn't make any sense, you know. Yeah, I know, said Bruno, burying his face deeper into the pillow to hide his reddening face. Aww, he's a tsundere. Tsundere Bruno! Still...
Bruno?
Even as their conversation trailed off fully, even as Ruth charged into the tent and pulled Bruno and Serena into a painful hug, even as Skipper walked in and mouthed off with one of his stupid jokes, even as the tent was taken down and the humorless rocket took off with an unfriendly blaze, even as the time came to leave Lyaslov, Bruno couldn't help but think, it wasn't a totally awful day. Aww, ba-da-ba-bum.
End of Arc 2.
That was good. What's the total name of Arc 2?
I don't know. You never asked me this for the first one, did you?
What's the name of Arc 1?
Oh, fuck.
What's the name of Arc 1?
Maybe that's our question. What would you call the arc so far?
Well, I think the easy way people would do it is probably call them the Kalis Breck and the Yaslov arc, but I feel like it would be cooler to give it a thematic name. Plus, that doesn't work. Yeah. Plus, I was going to say it doesn't work if you ever have an arc in the same location, like if they go back to Kalis Breck.
Kalis Breck return arc.
The Kalis Breck strikes back.
The Musashi retrieval arc.
Yeah, I like the Red Shadow
arc. Retrieval arc.
Well, you got that out of the way at the beginning. They retrieved Dragon. Easy. Done.
Oh, yeah.
So Arc 2, I think that's a good one. The Red Shadow arc. I kind of like Arc 1, the Stockholm Syndrome arc. That's the name. Since that's all it was Dragon being like, no, I don't want to be kidnapped too. Actually, I don't mind being kidnapped anymore. I'm fine. If you've ever seen that meme.
Right, so what did you think about Arc 2 as a whole, just while we're on the last chapter here?
I think it was good. I will say, and like I said, I want to be clear, Tan, I'm not insulting you as a writer. Overall, the writing's been good. I still am enjoying this. And it was very anime, which I personally like, but I do think the characters were very much caricatures, if that makes sense. Like, Samael was very clearly a villain, and Helga, they had to give her the tragic backstory to justify her being an enemy, etc., etc. But just because you use some cliches, I don't think doesn't make it inherently bad. I still had fun. I think the real fun of Arc 2 came from exploring Bruno and Serena's backstory, the development between their relationship with Dragon, and of course the fight scenes were pretty decently written. I think it's always hard to do a fight in writing. It's more of something suited to a visual medium, but you manage to write them in a way that they're not completely boring or tedious to follow. You keep it interesting enough. I would say the real highlight of this arc was probably the backstory more than the actual fighting Samael and the Red Shadow reveal, though. Like the thing with Mr. Fix, the stuff with Bruno and Serena, their relationship developing, yada yada. I thought that was all pretty cool. So I would say, even though I love the characters the most, I would say the weak part of this arc was the characters and the strong part was the world building. That's my final answer. Overall, I give this whole arc an 8 out of 10.
Nice. You did it.
That's my honest criticism. I still give Aetheral Space as a whole pretty good review, and I'm sure further arcs will be even better. But I still enjoyed it. I don't think it was a bad arc at all. What about you?
Yeah, I enjoyed writing this one.
Did you like it more than Arc 1?
I probably liked Arc 1 better, the way everything came together at the end.
Yeah, that you really did that climax justice. I hope you can pull off a similarly satisfying arc conclusion.
This was a different kind of story, though, so I couldn't really do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I agree. Very interesting.
With Arc 1, you had a lot of different people in different areas that all came together at the end.
So I have 2 questions this week to celebrate that it's Arc 2, and it's the end of Arc 2, so you have 2 questions. One is, what would you name the arcs, Arc 1 and Arc 2? What names would you give them? And 2, which one did you like better?
Nice.
Yeah.
Right, well, next episode we'll be starting Arc 3, which I've been looking very much forward to writing.
Does Dragon finally learn why he was kidnapped? Will Muzazi ever return? What happened to Samael's family? Find out next time in Aetheral Space, Arc 3.
Nice. Bye!